Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to the newest episode of Uncovering the Underground radio podcast show, brought to you from my companies Brutal Business Entertainment and Celestial Oddities Radio. As always, I will be your host and guide on this enthralling and encapsulating journey into underground entertainment. I am Reverend Frater Crow, and I want to thank you for listening in tonight. Whether you are listening live, streaming after the fact, or you've downloaded us to your device for on the go, any which of the three is fine, and I want to thank you for your patronage and support. I just ask that you click those buttons because as you do, it moves us up the podcast community rankings, allows more people to discover the show, keeps you in the loop with new episodes as they air, and gives you unfiltered access to our past archives. From music to modeling to stars of the screen, from comedy and oddities and everything in between, we bring you a show each and every Thursday night, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time across all platforms, and we always have a great time, whether it be this show, as we talked about, bringing you underground music, or it be one of our other two shows as well. We run Knights of the Nephilim podcast based around esoteric science, occult doctrine, ceremonial and ritual magic. We bring on guests and authors, occultists, very large names from across the world and talk to them about that subject matter. Or it'd be Celestial Oddities Pair of Normal Guys podcast, where we bring on guests in that subject matter as well, which is the paranormal and supernatural phenomena. We take on phone calls from around the world, we interview people, and we deep dive into subject matter of the strange and unusual. We got something for absolutely everyone. Now, tonight on Uncovering the Underground, we are on Season 2, Episode 14. So if you've missed any of the past episodes this season, make sure you jump back and check them out. We've had some amazing guests on from all different backgrounds, of death metal and metal to alternative to oddities to modeling and everything in between. We still have a great set of guests coming up to finish out the season, which will be episode 20. So we got 7 episodes if you count tonight, and excited to just deep dive into each and every one of our guests' entertainment, what they do, who they are. And we'll be jumping into our guests here in just a moment. So if you have any suggestions of what you want to see us do with the show, not do with the show, do differently with the show, anybody you want to see us have on the show or anything in between, don't be shy. Feel free to email us at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Again, that is celestialoddities@gmail.com. You can also, message us on the Uncovering the Underground radio page, which is on Facebook. It's a group page. We interact on there. We post a lot on there, so feel free to be a part of that community. And lastly, you can message us on the Frater Crow Facebook page, which is my personal page. Anyone who reaches out to us will get a message the same day or following day if it's late at night. So I always tell everybody you'll get an answer within 24 hours, 6 or 7 days a week. It doesn't matter when it is. I answer everybody. I always stay in tune with my fans. If you are listening out there, as I said, you can listen from anywhere. It doesn't matter what platform you're on. But if you go through Spreaker, which is Spreaker, speaker with an R, and you go through either their app on the app market or through the Spreaker.com page, that is our hosting company. It gives you an additional feature. Not only can you listen to the show, but you can actually interact with the show. There's an instant messenger feature on there that will allow you to, be able to talk with us during the show, ask our guest questions, give your input, and just be a part of the show. I will read out those things online or live on the air. So feel free to jump in. We already have someone that just dropped a comment right now, listening right now. So let me just answer him back and say thank you very much, brother. And that comes from Kelvin Frazier. So thank you so much, brother, for listening in. Anybody else wanting to be a part of the show in that regard, feel free to jump on. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about who our guests are this evening. And I say guests because it is a band, but we have only one of the members on tonight, which I'm happy to get to speak with. And we are talking about the band Carbonstone. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you about them. Hailing from Baltimore, Maryland, industrial alternative metal act Carbonstone merged hard-hitting guitars with catchy vocal hooks and electronic synth elements. Drawing core inspiration from the likes of gigantic acts such as Korn, 9 Inch Nails, Linkin Park, and Static-X, Carbonstone has managed to find its own special sound by carving a niche somewhere in between the melodic heaviness of nu metal and the digital industrial world of Electronica. The band recently released their first full-length album, Dark Matter, after a 7-year hiatus spawning 2 singles, AM Trauma and Hush, that have both simultaneously held #1 spots on 2 separate radio stations, Boston Rock Radio and The Sound 228, for well over a month straight. Hush is currently spinning on terrestrial radio stations in multiple countries and charting on the secondary market rock charts alongside some of the biggest names in the music industry. The album's first single, AM Trauma, released with an accompanying music video, received much praise and success after being picked up and promoted by record label Pavement Entertainment all summer and fall of 2021. The new album follows a string of released singles, including a fully reimagined, industrialized version of the classic hit I Just Died in Your Arms, which even drew the attention and thumbs up by Cutting Crew vocalist himself, Nick Van Egg. Carbonstone is Corey James, lead vocals and guitars, Neely Johns, guitar and backup vocals as well as production, Dan Kroll, bass, Tony Corelli, synths and production, and Jeremy Robertson, drums and programming. Very excited to bring these guys on tonight and find out more about them and let you hear the wonderful music that they make together. So, as I always say, light up your joints, crack open a few beers, kick up your feet, and lend me your ears as we dig in together and uncover the underground with Baltimore, Maryland band Carbonstone. How you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for coming on and letting me get a chance to, find out more about you guys as a band. And I know that, your brothers weren't able to make it this evening, and one of them had asked, they're like, is it okay if there's only one of us? I says, well, absolutely. The funny thing about interviewing bands is rarely do you have the full band. So they often will ask, is it okay if we're not all there? I'm like, it's rare that I get all 4 or 5 or 6 members of a band
right
on an interview at one time. And actually, not to make it easier for myself, but it is easier for myself when there isn't as many. So
I can understand that. And tonight is actually going to be a unique experience. It's going to be a sort of a one-of-a-kind interview that you're going to be the only one so far who has done an interview of Carbonstone without Corey.
Oh, all right. So I get the honor of the first non-vocal interview.
I'm pretty sure that's true.
We're just going to say it's true, folks. If it's not true, we're still going to tell you it is.
I'm sure Corey will check me on that.
That's okay. Well, I like to start off the interviews, Neely, very traditional as I do with all my interviews. And from there, we kind of change course. But I ask all bands that come onto the show, obviously we read your bio, but where did it all start? I mean, you said that, in the bio there was a hiatus. You guys came back and released the album. So, I mean, where did the roots of Carbonstone really start to take hold and grow?
Probably around 2003, 2004.
Oh, wow. So it's been some time. Okay.
Yes. We have quite a bit of material under our belt, actually. Only a select portion of it is published. Because it goes back to before this current distribution model that we use online. And we could put some of it up, but we want to focus on the newer stuff. We're not abandoning everything, and we're actually kind of slowly, one at a time, digging little pieces of it up out of the grave and bringing them back out into the light. But it was just Corey, and it was actually a band originally called Unspoken. And there is an EP that goes with that, and it's Unspoken is still to this day one of my favorite things to listen to when it comes to Carbonstone related content, even though I had nothing to do with it. It was just well produced and well written. So eventually this became Carbonstone, and there's a very funny story behind the name change that we can get into later, or we can do that now if you want. You tell me.
I'll tell you what. Go ahead and jump right into it.
Okay. I don't tell this story as well as Corey does because I wasn't there, but he was at a party, and there was mucho alcohol involved, as things go. And, somebody asked him, so what's your band called? And he was thinking about changing the name to Carved in Stone. Well, when you're 12 beers deep, it comes out Carbonstone. And the guy said, Carbonstone? And Corey said, yes, that's the new band name. That's how it happened.
After that, the whole party heard it, and they all kind of thought it was, and it's like, you know what? We're just going to go with it at this point.
Right, right. So a couple of years later, the band develops a little bit over those years, and they do some recordings as Carbonstone, and then they run into me. And I proposed to be a concert promoter at this time, and I know better than to try and do anything like that ever again. But it was a fun learning experience, and I hired Carbonstone to headline a number of shows, actually. And then I offered to record them. And then I had to go away for a little while. I had some legal problems. And when I came back, they said, hey, man, I had to pick up my guitar a couple of times throughout the process of recording, and they put an offer on the table for me to join, and the rest was history. We did a couple of EPs, we did some demos, we did an album, What You've Become, which is out there, I believe, on all of the usual places. And then there was the hiatus, which was basically because I quit. And we both tried to do some other things, and it didn't really work out. And a 10-year anniversary for the album that I recorded with them initially was coming up, and I wanted to do something with it. And we started talking, and nothing's happened with that yet. But that's what led to the album Dark Matter, which we basically wrote through lockdown.
I like that, though.
A lot of bands formed or reformed or wrote a lot of really good material during lockdown. It's one of the upsides in an otherwise unfortunate situation.
It's interesting because, as you just said, I mean, that is the case. It seems like a lot of bands have had the chance, whether they're already together or they've, reestablished themselves, even bands forming during this time because you had time to kill. Advances in technology have allowed us to work with one another across the country or the world much easier than once was. So you do see a lot of, or what I've noticed at least, is a lot of bands that were popular in the earlier 2000s in the new metal and the rock and metal, heavy metal scene have kind of stepped forward, and I've been seeing some releases from them, and we're planning on an upcoming tour, we're planning on some shows coming up, and it's like it's starting to merge out again, and I love that because that was a great time of music. And it seems that, as you said, during such a dark time and such a just strange turn of events over the last couple years, one of the silver linings, I guess you would say, is that it's given us a lot of time to reflect, a lot of time to work on ourselves and our projects. And now everybody's kind of crawling out of their shells. The hermit crab's crawling out of its shell and emerging back into the world. And it's interesting to see what has kind of become of it.
With lots to write about, too.
Yes. I mean, I think there was a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions. I mean, I'll tell you what, I'm a pretty strong-willed guy. I've been an occult practitioner for a long time, so I keep a very balanced mind. I have a very strict regime and stay very centered, most of the time. But I noticed, several changes in myself, in my thought patterns from the start of it, when everyone, even including myself to some matter, was like, okay, this is going to blow over pretty quick. I know there's a lot of people like, this will be gone in a week. I didn't think that. But I mean, I was thinking, okay, 4 or 5 months, they'll figure this out. We're going to get past this COVID thing.
Right.
And then it just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, oh, shit, something's going on. And then by year 2, I'm like, okay, we're in it hard now. And it started to really get to me because even though I still could go outside and do things, it just felt like you became so secluded from the world and everyone else, even though we still had ways of talking to each other. It started making you feel weird. Now, I don't feel so strange anymore, but when they really started saying, like, okay, it's okay to, at least here in Pennsylvania, it's okay to go out and, not wear your mask now. It wasn't mandatory in a lot of places. That first month or so was strange. Even being around people, I'm like, oh, shit, even though I don't normally have a problem with people, I'm kind of like, stay away from me, everybody. And now that's gone. So it's like we really got kind of shell-shocked by it. Like, I don't want to go around other human beings. Keep your 6 feet, damn it. So it's been very interesting.
Yeah. Where in Pennsylvania are you?
Pittsburgh.
Okay. I'm about 15 minutes from Gettysburg, but in Maryland.
Okay, so not too far out. Okay, great. No, I've that's one place. So aside from music and things that I do, I've been very involved over the years in the paranormal research field, but not in the same sense as most. Not like the television style or like you just knock on the wall for me, like actual research, like doing different vibrational frequencies and sound grids and things that you don't see anybody else really doing, and trying to break through the veil. And obviously being near Gettysburg, such a great place out there.
Of course.
Just jam-packed with energy. So I'm sure you've been there many times.
Where I live is called Taneytown, Maryland, which is where the battle at Gettysburg would have happened had General McClellan not sat on some intel that got left behind for a second time for like 72 hours.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
So it ended up just happening not too far down the road from you then.
Right. Washington has been through Taneytown. Taneytown is actually where Francis Scott Key was born.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right.
Yeah. It's a very, very historic area. It's a very old town.
That whole region. It's very. I mean, there's so much to see there, and it's just so jam-packed with history and energy, and you just feel it when you're in the area. I mean, you can just go there and feel it in the air, which is really nice.
And then I'm really close to Baltimore, which is party town.
Exactly, it is. And unfortunately, over the years has become, very dangerous as well. Very nice party town, but Baltimore is crazy these days. I don't know if it's still that way, but I know in the last several years it had gotten to be one of the more deadly cities in America.
Well, I've lived in the city myself, and I've lived in Maryland most of my life. And I can tell you from experience that you basically, it's a lot like New York. You mostly only find trouble if you're looking for it.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want to be in certain places, but be aware of where you are and don't look for trouble and you won't find it.
It's usually the case.
That's kind of a philosophy I've adapted to my whole life, really.
I mean, yeah, if you go looking for trouble, you will find it. If you try to steer clear, most of the time you won't have it. Doesn't mean something won't happen to you or you won't find it, but most of the time if you stick to that rule, you'll be okay. I mean, and that's everywhere anymore. Unfortunately, that's one of the things with COVID that I certainly have, noticed an uptick in is violence and crime and murder rate has skyrocketed. And a big part of that is because when you shut people off for 2 years and you have all kinds of feelings bottling up inside of people, and then inflation starts happening. Everything becomes more expensive. House prices are going crazy. Anytime there's been inflation, there is higher crime levels. And I know that here in Pittsburgh, that's certainly been the case. I don't remember a year as deadly as this past year in a very long time. I mean, there's shootings almost every night here. It's been kind of wild. So hopefully that'll start to die down as well.
Well, one of the memes going around is that Baltimore and Detroit are having a contest to see who can be the most violent city. But I don't really, I'm not going to say I'm turning a blind eye to it, but I try not to really just let that be part of my experience, if that makes sense. I'm aware of it, and I try to be a very humble and humane person and help people who I can when I can. But I also try to not project that kind of thing, and I try not to dwell on it. I don't ignore it. I acknowledge it, but I don't know, letting something like that fester in your mind is just not healthy, it seems to me.
No, I love that you said that because it brings me to two different points. One, I don't either. I know that it's going on because I hear people talking about it, or I will see a news article that happens to pop up, on Facebook or something like that when I'm promoting the radio show or some music. And usually I'll catch the headline. A lot of times I don't actually read the article or really absorb it. And a lot of times people will bring up news headlines to me and I haven't heard, and they're like, how have you not heard that? Well, here's a tidbit of info, folks. I don't have regular cable. I don't watch the news. I don't get the newspaper, and I don't read news on my phone a lot. And the reason why is exactly why Neely just said. I don't want to put this into my mind, because as you read it, as you focus on it, that vibration becomes entangled in your vibrational state. And you start to dwell on it. It starts to affect your mind. And that's the same reason that I don't get involved in a lot of drama from other people. I had someone message me a week ago And he was telling me that there was a situation where there's people out there slandering his name, and it's become a really bad thing. And he's always been a very nice guy to me, and I know him, but I'm not involved with him in any way other than we've had some friendly chats. And then he started sending me like what was being said and screenshots of it. And I says, listen, bro, I don't mean any rudeness by this. I don't care. I'm not going to look at the screenshots, nor am I going to absorb that. I hope you don't take offense, but I don't want to focus on it or even see it because then it becomes a part of my world, and it doesn't need to be. So I admire the fact that you said
there was a similar kind of a drama with the band, not between members, but just between some fans, and I was surprised to learn the nature of the issue, and that was all I was told. And they said, oh yeah, and it was kind of a similar situation, and they didn't offer it to me, but they said, yeah, I can show you the message. And I said, no, I believe you. I don't think I really need to see it. I understand the situation enough, you know.
Exactly. You don't, because I mean, you start to, what good's it help? It doesn't change anything for you to see it and then you to be a part of it. And then what I notice is these things just try to bring you down. And if you do allow someone to make you a part of that, then they want to make you a part of that to a higher degree. So they show you the pictures and then you look at it and then they're like, what's your opinion? Oh, I don't really want to give it. Oh, I really want to know your opinion. And then they pull you further and further in. So if you just shut them off at the gate and say, I'm not interested, then it can't affect
trying to pull me in this instance, you know, from within the hierarchy of the band. But me simply having that knowledge increases the chances of me commiserating with the next person, and now this negativity still has a vehicle, you know.
No, I agree. So I'm glad to hear that you're very similar in that regard. Just cut the bullshit and kind of stay away from it if you can.
Right.
Now, I want to bring up something that I know you are involved with, which is radio. And the reason I bring this up is you have a very good radio voice. I get told that quite often myself, but I'm listening to you talk, and you do have a very nice radio voice. So for the folks listening out there, you do also run your own radio show, and that is on Boston Rock Radio. And I know that it's a newer show for you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, or the fans out there a little bit about that?
So my show is called the Boston Rock Radio Rockin' Road Trip, and it's on the third Wednesday of every month, generally. Pardon me for a second. A little cough button action there. And we pull a virtual tour bus into a different town or entertainment district in a different state each month, and we pull together 3 bands from that area, and we interview them, and we kind of do what you do here. It's a very casual arrangement. We prefer to get bands who know each other. We prefer to let the inmates take over the asylum and just have fun. We want to hear about that crazy story where they both played at a club one night where, you know, Becky had too much to drink and did something wild, you know. That's kind of what we're going after. And we're also trying to raise awareness for local and regional bands, again, like you're doing.
Exactly. I love to do that. I mean, that was really the whole point of the show when it started, because I used to be very involved in the music scene for many, many years. First in a decently, you know, successful underground metal band, and then whenever the band days ended, I followed my passion in the hip-hop scene, which actually I didn't think anybody at first would ever take me serious. And then, you know, over a decade's time, I was able to do very, very well on that side of things, better than I was even with the band. And after those days ended as well, I started looking, I still want to be involved with music, but I don't necessarily want to be at shows each and every weekend, at the bar each and every weekend, and involved in that regard. And see, you do, so you're the opposite. And I started saying, well, what can I do to still be a part of this? And I came up with the idea of, well, I've always wanted to do radio. I think I'd be good at it. And I think it would be great to uncover the underground scene with underground bands, and that's where it really came about, is uncovering the underground as a way of diving into talented people, mostly bands and mostly metal bands, but I bring on all kinds. I've had reggae bands, I've had all kinds of different music and models and different things on. I center mostly around death metal, but I love the occasional band that's not. And you know, it just has been a great ride. I mean, we're in season 2, but I mean, we're on episode, I think, almost 80 now with the show, and then I run 2 other shows. So I put out about 200 episodes of radio now at this point between the 3 shows, and it's just been a fun ride to be involved in some form or fashion without having to be in the forefront anymore.
Right. And you know what? I actually love producing reggae. It's actually fun.
I've never played reggae. I've always had a love for it. I've been to the islands before and got to see some really awesome reggae music in the heart of it. Never have played, though, any style of reggae. I was boring in the fact that, I was a very good guitar player. I am, I guess, in some sense, even though I don't really play much anymore. But I was always just really, different forms of metal. So I would meet people and they'd be like, hey man, why don't you play some like really sick jazz riffs or some really sick blues licks? And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm a good guitar player, but I'm obviously not a good guitar player because I can't do it. And I always regretted that because when I learned, we've talked about this on the show before, whenever I was learning guitar, I feel happy that I didn't grow up in the current age because I had to teach myself everything and there really wasn't an easy way of doing it, and it was just from old tablatures that I could find. Whereas I look at the kids nowadays, they have it made. To be able to get onto YouTube and have a tutorial of any song from 500 different people doing it. Now you have all these programs. You can spend $10 a month and it shows you note by note. It can record the song and play it next to the live song. All this high technology that just didn't exist back then is breeding monsters. Some of the guitarists that I'm seeing that are young bucks and some of the vocalists and things that I'm seeing just couldn't have existed 20 years ago, and they are now. And I can't wait to see what the future brings. But I think it's great to see where the scene's going right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's a term, and I have to admit that I'm guilty of it because this is how 100% of our pre-production happens, and about 5 or 10% of our post-production too. But the term is, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, is desktop metal. Does that mean anything to you?
I've heard the phrase before, yes.
Okay, yeah, that's basically what you're talking about. I can plug my guitar directly into a $100 2-channel interface on my laptop, and it sounds like a Marshall stack or whatever the hell you want it to through software, and I can record a whole song and use Easy Drummer and make it. People can spot fake drums, but you can put together something in less than an hour. You can write a whole song that sounds radio ready. Yeah,
and that's crazy because we tried to do stuff like that back then. I remember like when we were having trouble finding a drummer, we were like, well, you know what, guys? What if we get a drum machine? Well, you know what? That sounds cool until you try to actually figure out how the hell to do a drum machine,
Yeah. Still need somebody who knows how to write a beat. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're like, okay, well, we got the drum machine. Now we don't know how the hell to use it. And then, we had these problems and you couldn't get the clear recordings back then. No one really could afford a home studio. So we talk about that on the show a lot of just, if you go back even 15 years, people really didn't have home studios or home studios that gave you very good quality. You didn't have the technology or the advances that you have nowadays. But as you said, with the term desktop metal, you can use interfaces, plug in, have any sounding amp or guitar from the click of a button, even though you're not playing that guitar. You can have a $100 guitar and make it sound like a Les Paul. And
that might be a stretch, but your point.
Well, you know what I'm saying. Yeah, that is definitely not true because in my mind, you're not getting that sound unless you have a Les Paul. But you can try to mimic it and get a good quality warm sound out of gear that you don't technically have, and record, as you said, studio ready material, and that has become, I think, a very good thing for the scene and for music in general because it's allowed for a lot of people who might not have otherwise been able to do it, or someone who has a great deal of talent and just doesn't have a band. They can program their drums. They can play the bass. They can play the guitar, and they do it all themselves. So there was a band I came across, and I guess I'm saying that term loosely. There was a project I came across not too long ago. It was just 2 guys. And it was an extreme death metal band. And when you listen to them, it sounded like a very tight-knit 5-member group. They were phenomenal. It was just 2 guys. And I'm looking at this like that wouldn't have been possible 15 years ago without a huge amount of money in your budget. And now that's easily possible for people. So it's great to see that.
Yeah, it's good for writing, but when the pandemic first hit, and Corey and I had just started writing, and the idea was for it to just be the 2 of us, which I wasn't really on board with, but anyway, and it still kind of is in a very small sense, and it's mostly just with the writing. But we have a complete lineup now, and originally the idea was, well, it's just going to be for shows, but no, we're kind of calling these guys full members now. And they're all people who we've known for a very long time. The drummer is new to us, but he's not new to all of us. He's really just new to me and Corey. I have people who work for me who know this guy because he is one of 3 engineers in the band. Tony, our producer, and electronic elements guy, keyboards, whatever you want to call it. There's just a long list of things he does. Jeremy, who is one of the main sound guys at Ram's Head Live, which is just about the premier venue in Maryland without going to an arena, and myself. And I actually hold down 5 different outdoor clubs throughout the state of Maryland. So it's a lot goes into this. A lot of different resource pools, if you will. But there's the functioning band, and then on top of that, Tony is explicitly our producer. And we basically don't run final product through anyone else. Gray lines, blurry lines between the purpose of different members of the band, but it's a cohesive unit, and we love playing together, and that's really what it comes down to for me. Not everybody can make band practice, and it's still fun when we practice, but like when we're preparing for a show, we will rent a showcase studio, and everybody has to go to these practices, and those are the best. And of course, the show is great. But this is all like us coming out is very new. Getting our toes spread is all this level of visibility is new to us, and people think that we are not that we don't have a good head of steam on our head, but people think that we're this like crazy established thing. And while we go back for a while, we're not that far out of this hiatus. About a month ago, we played a show at Baltimore Soundstage. That was our first show. Well, my first show in 8 years. That was the first Carbonstone show in 7 years.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it's familiar and it's new, and I think part of our newfound visibility is because of all this internet stuff, that it existed before, and we were definitely exploiting it to the best of our ability. But you can do so much more with it now.
Oh, it's phenomenal. I mean, if you think about the fact that there was an age where you would record. If you were lucky, you could record at a good studio, because if you did something at home, it just kind of sounded like crap. But there was a lot of bands doing that, and we even did that at one point in time. And then, you saved up the money, you went to the studio, you spent a lot of money for a professional studio, and then you made a 2 or 3 song EP or demo, and you went and stood somewhere, like for here it was Southside Pittsburgh, because there's 65 bars in one street. Right. And it's the go-to place. So you would just stand out there and hand out demos and talk to people and meet people, because you didn't have a way of doing that on the internet.
I've done exactly that. Yeah, man.
Yeah, you're just like, hey, man, you like metal music? And they're like, fuck no. You're like, oh. All right, man, well, thanks. Have a good night. You had to try to meet those people who did, and someone would be like, oh, yeah, brother, I'm a metalhead. Why? What's up? Hey, man, we have this 3-song demo. I would love to give you one. Check it out. We have we don't have a business card. We have our own made business card we wrote our name on the back. So if you're digging it, reach out to us and we'll let you know where the shows are. So it went from that to now at the click of a button, you can reach people in every country of the world. And that's a game changer. And I don't think a lot of the newer generation is aware of that. It's like one of those things that I say, it's on demand. Everything's on demand now, where, I loved the days of going to a music store, saving my allowance, mowing yards, working my ass off to go to that store as a teenager, go in and buy 1 or 2 albums that I wanted and 1 or 2 albums of a band I never heard before, because their artwork was dope and I loved it, and I wanted to see, are they good or are they not? And the feeling of ripping that cellophane off, them little bastard stickers that you couldn't get off the case of the CD. You know, those moments. And I said, that is something that sounds so simple that people are like, yeah, so what? It's changed. No, there was something to be said about that. Whereas now I can go onto Amazon and check out any album I want at the click of a button, listen to the first 5 songs, judge a band, and move past it. Well, what about 7, 8, and 9 on the CD that were 3 phenomenal songs that we never even got to because people were so wanting to jump to everything out there that they never even listen to the full albums now in most cases, and they don't have that appreciation. So I don't think people realize those days of handing out demos on the street and people laughing at you, or handing it out and watching someone walk 25 feet away and throw it right in the trash. And You're like, son of a bitch. You know, we had to buy those burnt CDs. We had to burn these, man, on a disc. So it's just crazy to see that. But as you said, being an old band who's new and getting back out there and seeing in a short amount of time with new technology and the reemergence of you guys back into the scene, how different it is now than when you guys started 15 years ago.
Well, so this very thing actually very directly affected the band's sound. So what the album Dark Matter sounds like, we're industrial alternative metal. And what's not written there, that there's little pieces of too, it's a little bit of goth and even a little bit of EDM, kind of a dance, a little bit of a twist in there, and you'll catch it when you play the tunes. It'll be very obvious, but it's not the basis of the songs. It's still metal, it's still industrial, but it's definitely very different, and we put a lot of melodic stuff into it. But before that album, we sounded really very much like a lot of radio-friendly hard rock and alternative metal, and it was simply because Corey, and this was his brainchild, he always wanted these elements in our music, but we just didn't have the means, and now we do.
And that's it. That's another point, with adding the synths in and adding different forms of production that you couldn't have done before. So you came back out, you see what the promotion and the marketing can be, but you also see what elements you can add that you just wouldn't have been able to do years ago. So with that being said, why don't we jump into one of the tracks that we have here? We have 3 different tracks this evening. I would like to start out with Hush, if that's okay.
That's cool.
All right, folks. So out there listening right now, this is Carbonstone from Baltimore, Maryland area, and this is their track, Hush. And we'll be right back after this on Uncovering the Underground.
Just can't let it go. Lose my self-control. Mistakes always repeat. Well, lessons I'll never learn. I slip away sometimes to hide what lies inside. And even with retreat, I can never seem to get away. Staring through the inside, murdering your line. Ever feel like you're always faking? Told you never know I'm suffocating. It seems so long ago. Stars are all I know. I've covered them in ink. Will I always feel that place? Distance breaks it now. Echoing the sound. A chance to hit rewind. Could I ever chase a hand of time? Inside, murdering your line. Ever feel like you're always faking? It's all in how you hold secrets left untold. You never know I'm suffocating.
right, folks, we're back on Uncovering the Underground radio show. We have been hanging out for the last 40 minutes with Carbonstone, and the member that we are with this evening is Neely. He is one of the guitarists of the band, or he is the guitarist of the band, I should say. And we have been talking over who the band is, how they got started, how they were on hiatus and recently reemerged into the scene, the differences of long ago to now in technology and advances in marketing, promotion, and just availability to so much for bands this, day and age, how the pandemic has allowed them to do a lot of things and so many others out there as well, and so much more. So if you're just tuning in now, don't fret. You can listen live till the end of the episode. At that point, you can always jump back to the beginning and stream it or download it to your device. But for now, you have to listen to it till the end of the show, and then you can jump back and listen to the whole thing. And hell, even if you have heard it from the beginning, go back and listen to it again anyway. Why not? Share it with your friends, and let us know if you have any questions or anything you want us to read off on the air. You can do that through Spreaker.com or the Spreaker app by searching Uncovering the Underground. You can not only listen, but it does give you that instant messenger feature. And we did get a question that came in, but before I go into that, that was the single Hush, and that was off of Carbonstone's album, full-length album, Dark Matter, that released, I believe that was 2021, you said?
Yes. On Halloween.
Halloween, okay, perfect. So we're not even.
And I mentioned, the industrial or the goth and EDM dance elements, and that one is a little more straightforward. Some of what I mentioned is in there, but when you get into the other songs, it'll become a little more diverse. And
you know what? You can actually hear the industrial / EDM style synths towards the end of that song. There's a part that really comes in, and I love that. Yeah, so it's very apparent, and I love that in your guys' sound. It's different. There was a band years ago. What was their name? Crossbreed. And it's been a long time, and I haven't listened to them in years, but they back in like early 2000s had a industrial / electronica / metal type sound that no one really was doing that at that time. And I loved those guys. And for some reason, listening to that track just made me remember them. And I haven't thought of them in years. So I'm really excited to actually look them back up. Now, it's one of those things. It's like you haven't seen a movie since a kid and then you watch it again. That can go really well. Or that can go really bad. Sometimes you watch the movie again and you're like, this movie sucks. So hopefully
Crossbreed's in my personal notes to check out later.
Yeah, I'll have to check them out. It's been a long time. So if you look them up and they're absolute trash, please don't judge me on it. But at one point in time, I liked them. But no, there's things like, it just made me think of the Wonder Years. Now, my wife and I, we liked the Wonder Years when we were a kid. So we went back a few years ago and we're like, we're going to rewatch the Wonder Years from start to finish. It was painful, not because it's not good, but because Kevin Arnold's such a little prick. And the whole entire series, you're like, oh, wow, I used to like this and like him. And you're like, what a little fucking ignorant asshole this character in this TV show is. Because he really was to his family and everyone else around him. So it's like one of those moments. You're like, man, this isn't what I remember it being.
Right.
So hopefully Crossbreed's good. I'm thinking they're still going to remain true. So I'm going to look them up myself.
Yeah, some things don't stand the test of time. I find that to be less the case with music, though.
True.
Some stuff can go way back. Like one of my favorite tunes of all times, this is really, really obscure. It's a Procol Harum song.
Okay.
If you know who that is. We're talking like pre-classic rock. This is going back into the 60s. A Whiter Shade of Pale is the song they're known for, but they have another song called Whiskey Train. And it sounds like a late 70s, early hard rock tune, but this was mid 60s. I mean, it's really wild to hear somebody really rocking out like that in the 60s. It might have been the late 60s, but it's a really heavy song for its time. It's worth a listen.
It's funny because there are some, people that were ahead of their time that were releasing music that might not have even been heavy, but when you listen to it now, you hear where the influence was and what it was leading to. And you're like, oh, wow, that was, there's bands I've heard, and I'm like, yeah, that was heavy metal before heavy metal existed.
Exactly.
And you're like, man, can you imagine if there would have been heavy metal in this guy's day? Like what they would have been doing? So it's always pretty cool to hear. And let me take a look here. That came out, I was trying to see if it gave me a year. I was gonna.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I had it pulled up and it just disappeared, so we'll try to see if we can pull it back up. I have it as 1970.
Okay.
1970 even. So no, that's great. I mean, that's an old track.
It sounds about 10 years ahead of its time. It really does.
Oh, I imagine. There was some, in the 70s, there were so many great bands. So much. It's one of those questions you ask people, what was your favorite era of music? And I think they're all very important, but they're all so incredibly different. I mean, if you think of the music of the 50s, you think of the 70s, you think of the 80s, and you start to, 80s and the 90s, when you think of bands like Bon Jovi, and you think of Eddie Van Halen and Jump, where keyboards started getting really big, and then Dio came out, and everybody had keyboards in their song and stuff, and you had Flock of Seagulls and stuff like that, like bands like that started emerging in between the 80s and 90s. It's just so funny to see each decade have its complete own sound. And then a lot of people would argue, people around my age would say, oh, the 90s were great. 90s kind of was one of the worst eras of music for me, but I think that there was a lot of good stuff as far as grunge. When you talk Nirvana, when you talk Pearl Jam, when you talk Soundgarden and bands like that, absolutely. But other than bands like that, everything else for me was kind of garbage. But I mean, it's in the ear of the beholder, because I would tell you right now that there's not a lot of, at least in a mainstream sense, a lot of great music out right now. But at the same time, there's more hidden gems now than there's ever been. I mean, yes.
And that is why my answer to the question of what is my favorite era of music is right now.
Yeah, because there's so much. I mean, for instance, I was talking to someone the other night, and I said, I love death metal, and I've always been a huge extreme death metal fan. And I grew up on Deicide, and I grew up on Napalm Death and Cannibal Corpse and Torture Killer and all these great, old school metal bands, Skinless, Brain Drill. And that's great. And then it went through this stage where it kind of really got stale and the metal disappeared and there was some left, but there just really wasn't that great stuff. It was the same old. And then you step away from it for a few years, or you stop looking as much. You fast forward to the modern day now. There is so many absolutely phenomenal, extreme technical death metal bands out there right now. And there's other people told me, I don't know, man, I don't hardly ever come across anything that really surprises me. And I'm like, you were looking in the wrong hole, brother. I'm like, because I could probably send you 45 albums right now that are absolutely mind shredded. And I'm not saying just because they're aggressive or they're technical. I find that perfect balance in between where it has all the great elements of a band, because you always have the bands that just want to be extremely aggressive and they miss the catchiness of the music. You have the bands that focus so much on the catchiness and melody, but they miss the extremeness of it. So there's that nice blend in between it when it comes to that genre of music specifically. But there was never a time period in history that there has been more hidden gems of phenomenal bands that no one's ever heard of.
So if you really want your mind blown, if you're into death metal, imagine Alice in Chains as a hardcore and death metal band called Lesser Glow from Florida.
Let me write that down right now, because Alice in Chains is one of my favorite bands of all time. So, Lesser Glow. And my pen's like, no way, because it stopped working. No, that's that brings me to a good point. We were talking about the 90s, and Alice in Chains was one of those bands that, and you could always say the woulda, coulda, shouldas, but if Lane Staley didn't die, it's really hard to say what bounds they would have been able to break, because I feel that when you go to the grunge area, everybody wants to talk about Pearl Jam. People talk about Nirvana. People talk about, Soundgarden, all these other bands.
Like Chris Cornell, yeah. I talk about them all, but yeah, your point, yeah.
I mean, but
Blaine
they all
is not
fall
talked about
short.
enough.
They all fall short of, to me at least, Alice in Chains. I think that they were just a shining star that had so much potential. And not only them as a band, but when Lane Staley did his project, Mad Season.
Yeah.
They only released that one album, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. And then the whole album's about him beating and conquering his struggle with heroin, and then he turned around and died on an overdose. So it was very heartbreaking to see, hey, I won this battle, and let me tell you, in the most poetically sad, beautiful form in this Mad Season album, and then turn around and relapse and die.
We lost a lot of people from that scene.
Yes, everyone.
And that scene was a complete picture. You talk about, how underrated Lane Staley was, and I agree. Whether or not he runs rings around them, I'm not going to say I disagree. He was fantastic, but the scene was not complete without all of them.
Correct.
And another album that I think is underplayed is Temple of the Dog.
Yes, great album.
Yeah, great album.
It's like you said, they all played a part. I mean, and every one of them, for the most part, has found a bitter end, and that's what's so sad about that specific time period and scene. I mean, Kurt Cobain, you have Chris Cornell, you have Lane Staley, you have Scott Weiland. You have every one of them. The only band that seemed really to be huge at that time that is still around, knock on wood that nothing happens, would be Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam. And those guys are still around. I mean, I don't think they play as much these days, but, they're one of the only ones that are still from that time period that are still around. Every one of them fell into some type of sorrow, and that's sad because it was such a great scene.
Well, I think there's no irony in the fact that I think it was really foretelling with the Temple of the Dog album, Mother Love Bone, that the guy who set the whole scene alive never lived to see his own acclaim.
Yeah. It's I guess that was just like, that was a part of that. I mean, every music has its own stigma and its own feel, and I guess when grunge came out, it was like, we're going to let you into our world and show you this new thing, but this is real. I mean, and
enjoy it while you can.
Enjoy it while you can. This is a flash in the pan that'll change music forever, because I think it certainly has. But that was it. It was like, here's these 5 or 6 great bands to really set the world on fire in that scene and change a lot of things, but then it would all eventually vanish off the map pretty much. That's just wild.
Yeah.
Now, why don't you tell us, obviously, so we listened to, Hush, and, the album overall, I've listened to pretty much the entire thing at this point. I love it. I think you guys have a really diverse and catchy sound, like I said, which took me back to a flashback of a band that I liked earlier, like I was talking about. But it's such a newer and advanced way of presenting an industrial / metal sound. How did that feel coming into that? Because obviously you guys have been around, you went away for a while and came back, and it kind of found this sound. And I say it all the time to bands that sometimes a band's true sound is their first album, and then after that, they kind of dissipate from their regular sound. Some bands, it takes a couple albums to find their sound. You guys were around for a while and had written music, and now have come back with this really, powerful, punching debut, even though it's not necessarily your first album, it's your first album. And How does that feel? I mean, with this new sound, how was that whole thing coming together once you guys really were hearing the finished product, especially since your producer was a huge part of that? Once he was letting you hear those master tracks afterwards, guys, check out what I've done with this. What did you guys think?
Well, we were kind of there as he writes it. Or at least Corey is always there. I'm occasionally there. Sometimes I phone in, quote unquote, my tracks from my own studio. Because of the nature of my job, I'm producing a lot of live shows generally, and that keeps me away on the weekends. At any rate, it was a different process both the writing and the production. That took me some getting used to. But it works. That wasn't a problem. Where I really had to get some getting used to was how do you define industrial? Because as long as I've known Corey, because it's a very long time, very, very long time, I'd have to think really hard, but I think it's on the order of 15 years-ish. At any rate, it's something that was always talked about, industrial. And I'm like, yeah, it's great. And, and I have this sound in my head, and Corey has a sound in his head. And I came to discover that Corey's idea of industrial and mine are a bit different. My idea, let me start that over. My idea of industrial has a little more teeth and a little less polish. But this isn't really just industrial. There's more to it than that. And I figured it out, and I understand it better, and it helps with writing subsequent material. But it's cool. It's fun. It's an adventure. It's something new. I always chase after something different. What some people would call what is it? Gosh, I'm losing this word. When you're having not a nervous breakdown, but basically a nervous breakdown, an esoteric crisis.
Okay.
Yeah, but I call them an esoteric adventure. I've had a couple of those in my life, and I find that there's a physical anxiety to it, but there's a personal growth to it. I always try and learn something new every day. So being able to go through this learning experience, and not to say that was an esoteric crisis, but it was cool. It was fun because it's a big part of my life. How I most effectively express my feelings is through music. So being able to figure out how to do it in a new way was kind of cool. The album before this, we went through another process that I'd never been through, and to varying degrees, I still debatably am almost more proud of the last album than this one. We put so much blood, sweat, and beers into this album. We wrote an entire album. We practiced at a studio where I worked out of also, that our bassist owned, and it was cool, and we were ready to go, and we were like, okay, let's do this whole pre-production process, which we did. And then our bassist said, okay, now we're going to strip every single part of every song down note by note, and we have to come up with a reason not to change it.
I like it.
And if we can't, then we change it. And what came out of the other end, I think, was an amazing album. We didn't exactly do that with this album, but we do in a sense, because it starts out with a basic idea from Corey for a song. And he'll start writing some lyrics, and he'll maybe have a couple riffs, and he'll bring it to me. And we'll flush it out into a full arrangement, and he'll write the lyrics, and we'll do this whole pre-production process with canned drums, and I'll lay down a basic bass line, and it'll sound like a hard rock or even a thrash tune, because I tend to use very metal drums. It's just a personal preference. And then we take it to Tony, and that's when the magic happens. The vocals, if we tracked vocals in the demo, get completely re-recorded. If the guitars are good, then he uses them, or if I can make it, then I'll record them there in studio. But yeah, Tony, he takes over when it comes to writing the bass and the drums and all the electronic elements. And so the song takes on a completely different life from when we go into when it comes out.
I love that, though. When you go into the studio and you have a polished product, and you feel you have a polished product at least, and then you take it to a good engineer, and then he says, I love what you guys are doing, but listen, I want to make this suggestion here, and here. Just try it. And I know that some of the best stuff that my band had ever done would be when we went to our engineer, and he would say, I really know that you guys like that guitar riff, like the way that you're playing it, but I want you to play it at a completely different time signature. Or I want you to play it a completely different way. And we're like, well, I don't know, man. Just trust me and try it. And if you don't like it, hey, we scrap it. And then we try. And he's like, okay, I recorded that. Now play this way over top of that. And then, what was end up only being 2 guitars end up being 3 tracks. And then we listening back, and we're still like, I don't know, just trust me. And we spend 45 minutes on something that wasn't even supposed to be in the song, and then he plays it back to us, and we're like, oh shit. And he's like, yeah, you hear that though, man? Do you hear it? And we're like, okay, yeah, that's always meant to be in this song. We didn't hear it, but you certainly did. And like you said, he was like the unofficial member that's now the official member, and that is what a good engineer does. And too many people overlook the quality of a good engineer. There's a lot of engineers that record. There's not a lot of great engineers.
Let me not understate his position in the band. He plays shows with us.
Oh, perfect. I didn't know that. So that's awesome.
It's not like we just see him in the studio. No. He hasn't made an appearance in any videos yet due to availability, because his studio is very heavily booked, generally months and months ahead.
Awesome.
And Jeremy, the drummer, is just new and hasn't managed to be able to get scheduled in yet. But Tony knows that he doesn't even need to be polite about his suggestions. He doesn't ask, and we don't ask questions.
It shouldn't be. I mean, when you build that rapport with someone, after a while, I mean, that was the same way. It went from at first, like, let me tread lightly. Hey, do you guys want to try this? Or, hey, I have a suggestion. To just like, no, Garrett, don't play it that way. Play it this way. I like what you're doing, but it's wrong. You need to play it this way. And I'm like, but I worked 2 months on that. They're like, yeah, I understand it. It's fucking wrong and it's no good. Do it this way. And I'm like, all right, let me try it. Because you have to have that where, you're having fun. You respect that person, but you tell them how it is. Like, hey, I understand you think that's the best that you can do, but it's garbage and you can do better. And if you aren't close enough to your bandmates to look at them dead in the eye and be like, hey, man, that sucks. Fix it. Then you don't have a good band, because you have to be able to really just be carefree with them. Now, we have a question that came in from a listener out there, and they said, I would like to know, and I guess it was open, not necessarily just to Carbonstone, but in music in general, what is the craziest moment that Neely has had at a live show?
I mean, there's so many. The first one that pops to mind is specifically as it relates to Carbonstone shows, because I've seen some crazy things happen hours before the show, too. So just working in live events. Playing the club stage at a club called Sonar that doesn't exist anymore in Baltimore. It was an institution. And one of our fans being really drunk, a female, and jumping up on stage and dry humping my monitor. That was annoying and amusing at the same time. I've run monitors for Uncle Cracker so drunk that you couldn't understand a single thing that he was saying. He was like perfectly in key and perfectly on time. And if you were drunk, it didn't matter, but you could tell. I had a guy walk into a club. He wasn't even there for the show. It made it halfway across the dining room and then just fell flat on his face before he could even get to the bar. And so like, all right, I guess we should call an ambulance. And we did. And before the ambulance could get there, he got up and walked out and then fell flat on his face in the middle of the parking lot. And then the ambulance showed up, and then he got up again and refused service, and then walked a few feet and fell flat on his face again and said, okay, we're taking this guy.
This guy needs to go. That's it, buddy. 3 falls and you're out.
I've seen the Bud Light rep for a club get caught taking a piss behind the club at a show. I've seen a band's merch guy get staked out by the cops and get picked up on a warrant. So many crazy things.
There was a show that we played at, and see, so I really respect you for the fact that I was a promoter and booker myself for a while, and that was really my bread and butter. As soon as we launched out from the get-go of high school and went right into a band, started playing live shows, what I wanted to do that was different than everybody else is, yes, I want to be in a band, and I want to be out there and be known for it. But I also want to be the guy that brings all the bands from all over the place. So I was 18 years old booking bands from halfway across the country to come here and play. And
nice.
Just started throwing these shows that were sold out each and every time, and it was phenomenal. And my thing was I wanted to give people in an area that's just destroyed, that was very, very known for labor and warehouses that got sold then out of the country and then just became a desolate wasteland. And only thing here was drug use and nothingness. So I was like, what can I do? What can I do as my part in this to help? I want to give kids something to have an outlet. and mine was always heavy metal and death metal. So I started, like I said, at 18 years old, booking shows that were at your local VFW and Eagles or something like that, but 400 people would show up. And like the VFW would be like, we can't have this many people here. I'm like, well, they're here, brother, so you got to figure it out.
Better start pouring some beers.
You better start pouring some beers because it's happening. And we started bringing all these bands in, and they got bigger and bigger, and it was always a great time. And we had this band, and I don't know what kind of trash human beings these people were, but I had heard of them, and I don't even know why they were on the show. They weren't like a favor of mine. I didn't know who they were really, but I think I had given them a chance. And they were playing, and they walk out and pretty much say like, fuck everyone here, you're all filth. And sometimes that could be like just a death metal thing, like, oh, we're everybody's scum of the earth.
Right.
Well, no, they took it way beyond that. They come out and they're like, you're all garbage, spray the front line of the crowd with silly string in their eyes, and then cracked this kid in the forehead with the cannon, split his wig wide open.
Jeez.
He started gushing blood everywhere, like dropped his ass. Opened up a thing of water and dumped it right into our monitors. Directly into the monitors, and started stomping it and smashed our monitor.
It's time to call the cops.
Well, at that point, we hit the kill switch on it. Song one,
Yeah.
they were like 45 seconds into their first song and just stopped dead. And this dude started flipping out. What the fuck are you doing shutting us off? What do you? And I was like, bro, you just split this poor kid's head open for no reason, and you just dumped water into my $10,000 PA system and destroyed my monitors. And his response was, you've apparently never been to a real metal show before. I said, bro, I book real metal shows every weekend. I says, I've never had the disrespect of someone purposely opening a bottle of water, dumping it directly into my monitors, and then smashing them as hard as they can with their boots. I was like, that's not metal. And then he tried to make some regard like, oh, well, I've played Mr. Smalls before, which is a venue here. And I'm like, bro, I've played Mr. Smalls like 18 times. I'm like, I don't know what that even means. So the reason I go to the stories is one of the craziest stories of anything I've ever experienced at a show, because I pretty much told him, I was like, hey, man, I don't think you understand where you're at right now. You're in our hometown. I was like, and everyone here at the snap of a finger, I said, will beat you to death in the parking lot. And I was like, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes to get your equipment out of here, or you're going to get beat to death in the parking lot. And he turned around, and there was like 400 people standing there staring at him. And I was like, yeah, you should probably get moving. Well, they rushed as quick as they could, but they couldn't get all of their equipment. They left their drum set. Beautiful Pearl drum set. I dumped gasoline on it that night and set it on fire on video and sent it to them.
There you go.
And I was like, there's your drum set, bro. I was like, you smash my monitors, I burn your equipment to the ground. And that was one of those moments that was kind of infamous for a while, that like, wow, these dudes literally took video of them burning this band's drum set. And I'm like, you're goddamn right I did. They smashed my monitors out. I'm like, that's how it works. But that was one of those moments that through a lot of shows, never seen anything like that before.
I was mixing a death metal show. The headliners were a band from Norway. They were really pissed because the promoter was not giving them any free beer, and he told them that they would. And during their set, the fog machine set off the fire alarm. They continued to play. The fire department showed up and pushed their way through the crowd, had to climb up the stairs and get like up on the side of the stage to get to the room where the panel was for the fire alarm system. They shut off the system and then left, and the band literally never stopped playing the whole time. All the firemen were climbing up on the stage and everything.
Now, when you say Norway, were they just Norway metal, or were they Norway black metal?
Oh, I don't know. It was
because them black metal bands from Norway, man, they're fucking hardcore. You don't mess with those guys.
It was death metal and black metal bands. It was in Silver Spring, Maryland, where there's a very, very active death metal community. It's 90% Latino.
Okay, interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah. But I mean, these guys don't fuck around. They don't fuck around with their metal. They love it.
You know, I think any good metal fan should. I mean, that's my thing. Is I love all music, but when people come to me and they're like, what is your favorite music to listen to? I'm like, extreme death metal. And they're like, seriously? Out of everything? I'm like, absolutely. I go to bed every night listening to absolute insane death metal. It's just always been my thing. That's my lullabies, guys. That's what I'm into. So, how has it been though for you? As it's an interesting perspective. I've lived it myself. Being a promoter and a booker and being in a band. Do you find that to be
okay? So see, I only did the promoter thing for a couple of years, and I decided it's not for me.
Okay, but you're still working venues though.
Well, yes, I have an LLC. I provide engineering and sound systems. I do deployments. I do rentals.
Okay.
I've got engineers working under me. I run live shows myself because that's where I love to be, behind the mixer or on stage, one or the other. So my day job very adequately supports my hobby because it's all in the same network.
I love that.
And it's great. So, yeah, I mean, really, I could make all kinds of phone calls and get all kinds of things done if necessary. I know a lot of people, and it works well on both ends of my life. I don't see it as two different ends of my life. I make my living off of music. I also do studio production and mastering, but then my true love is playing music, and I get to do both.
I love that, though.
And it's awesome.
And it kind of answered the question, and I'll kind of extend off of that. As I guess without the promotion, it changes a little bit. But do you find that people want to tap into that? So, what I was going to ask as a promoter. I noticed this myself as a promoter back then, that it was a great thing and it helped me because I had, as you said, a lot of connections and I could reach out and make a lot of things happen. But then I had a lot of bands that we would be playing with on a regular show that I didn't book, but they would hear that you're a promoter and then they're really trying to get in good with you. Like, hey man, I heard you book like 8 different venues, huh? And you're like, yeah. And then they'd always try to get that extra pull. Like, well, we kind of met each other tonight. We're jiving, right? And I'm like, bro, this is the first we've ever spoken. Like, I'm not going to throw you, a bone for 8 other venues just because we've talked for 45 seconds.
Right. I haven't even heard your demo yet.
I haven't even heard your demo yet. I didn't even know you were a part of the other band, to be honest with you. So do you get a lot of that? I mean, being a sound guy and an engineer, do you have a lot of people like, hey man, is there any hookups you can give me because you have the hookups at this point?
Definitely. And I even go out of my way to try and help some of my friends out in certain bands. All of the clubs that I deal with don't really do original music. They all do cover bands, largely cover bands, or well-known regional or national bands occasionally. But yeah, some of the clubs that I have under my thumb are kind of sought-after places to play. And people just need gigs. People want to play anywhere they can.
Yeah.
So yeah, it happens. Not a lot. It's not obnoxious. I think most of the people that I deal with understand that I'm production, not booking. But and some people don't get it. That's definitely a thing. Some people also don't get that the band on stage, I don't control them. I don't make them play the song. You have to actually talk to them about it. I can't push a button and now they're playing Bruno Mars. It's not how it works. They're organic sentient beings on stage performing this. I'm not a DJ.
Yeah, and I mean, some people just don't really get how it works. And, just like I said earlier, with an engineer, you have to respect a really good engineer. You have to, respect a very good sound engineer as well live, because there are so many people that call themselves a sound guy that know absolutely nothing about running sound.
So there's a principle when it comes down to this, and a couple of different philosophies that I like to share with people about sound. And it all leads to a vicious circle of good bands work with good producers and good producers work with good bands.
Yeah.
I find that I'm able to do more as an engineer and as a producer when I'm working with a more talented band. And I'll get off of stage or out of the studio with a band and they'll say, man, you made me sound really good. And I say, I made you sound as good as you sound.
Yes, I love that.
Because
that's
I
true.
can fuck it up real good for you, but I can't make you better than you are. I have to start with something good. And also, getting a good monitor mix seems to be a challenge throughout the industry, and I understand why. It's not just because not all engineers are that good. It's a challenging environment, but I get a reasonable amount of compliments on my monitor mixes, and I tell people the best way to get a good monitor mix is to give them what the fuck they asked for.
And you know what? You just made two of the strongest points, folks. If you're listening out there, those 2 points that Neely just made are two of the most pivotal points that can be made. And I haven't heard anybody else say that. So I am in high level of respect right now. And the reason being is that is exactly true. A sound man can only make the band sound as good as they truly are. But they can certainly make them sound worse. So whenever a band sounds phenomenal, yes, that is definitely due to the sound man knowing what they are doing, but that is the band at its peak. That is the band sounding how the band can sound if and when they have the right audio engineer. When you hear that same band somewhere else and you're like, Jesus Christ, these guys sound horrible tonight. It could be that they're having an off night, or it could be that the mix is horrible. And as Neely just said, someone who can give a good mix through the monitors helps a band tremendously. There's so many clubs we would play, and we would play with headliners, and we would not get what we're asking for. The sound man wouldn't give a shit about us because we are nobodies, but coming up after us was Devil Driver. So when Devil Driver came out, they sounded phenomenal.
They sounded great.
Yeah, they sounded great.
Another thing that happens in the industry, and I don't know how commonplace this is, but sometimes tour managers will approach the local sound guy and say, you need to put compression on your mains. They can't be more than X dB louder than the headliners.
And that, or sometimes I know that, like, a lot of times I would see, like, we'll use Devil Driver as an example, when they would come out, they came over and that sound guy was booted. They had their sound guy sit down behind the board.
And that's common enough.
Yeah, they had their own guy who crushed it, but sometimes that isn't the case. In the same sound man, you see him back there working his ass off for the headliner. But I'm like, hey man, can I get the other guitarist in my monitor? He gives you a thumbs up. You start to play the next song. There's no guitar in your monitor.
It's not there.
You finish the song. And you're like, hey man, and you're doing it live. The fans can hear this. You're like, hey bro, can you give us a little bit more guitar in the monitor and turn the bass up a little bit?
And it sucks to have those conversations in the middle of the set for everyone to hear.
Yeah, the whole crowd's looking at you, and I'm like, I shouldn't even be asking this because he should fucking hear it. And I've asked him now 3 times, and 3 times in a row he hasn't given it to me. And I remember there was one show specifically. It was a very big show, packed house, sold out, very big venue, headlining bands after us. It was a big moment for my band. And it was like 4 times in a row. I was like, bro, I can't hear shit out of this monitor. I'm like, you might as well turn it off. I can't hear anything. Can you please turn down the bass? You have the bass so loud. I'm like, I can't hear. And give me some other guitar. I need to hear my guitarist. And for like the 4th time, he gave me a thumbs up, and we started again, and there was no guitar, and and I'm like, all right, fuck this guy, and just continued to play, and we finished, and people still said we sounded good, but I'm like, no, he butchered us. I'm like, this dude butchered us live for some reason, and I don't understand why. We were nice from the beginning, but then we started getting pissed off towards the end. So that goes back to my point that with a proper sound man, as you said, you can make the band sound as good as they are, but you can make the band sound proper. Or you can destroy them, and that'll happen. So thank you for saying both of those points, because those are very valid to a musician.
And when there's an offset, a lot of times, especially when there's alcohol involved, you end up with misdirected hostility in both directions. Oh, yeah. People blaming the band when it's the sound guy's fault, and vice versa. So,
and I've definitely gotten into it with some sound guys before. I mean, even in the rap side, I did rap for years. I still do from time to time. There's times where, like, I was ready to get off stage and beat this fucking guy. Like, I'm like, all right, dude. I'm like, if you fuck me on one more song, and I with my rap persona, I'm a very dark individual, and everybody knows it. I was like one of the kingpins of horrorcore underground hip hop. And it was okay to be very violent. I mean, I remember one show specifically, again, I was like, bro, if you fuck me on one more song, I says, I'm coming back there and beating you in front of everybody. I was like, I'll fucking beat you all over this club. And the sound man's looking at me, and I was like, I'm not joking either. I was like, if you fuck me one more time, you're getting beat. And then finally, the last song of the night sounded perfect. I'm like, thanks, bro.
You know,
Thank
sometimes
you,
gotta
guy.
do what you gotta do.
He was like back there with headphones on, listening to his iPhone while he's
Oh,
doing
brother.
sound for me, like completely just giving me like, I don't care about your music, I guess because it was rap. And that's the way I got it, is he's normally a sound guy for bands, and he must not give a shit about rap music. And that's fine that you don't like it personally, but you're a hired sound man. So for that night, you better goddamn well love it and give it justice. That's your job.
Right.
So it is
Yeah.
what it is. But so why don't we jump in? We have another song here we're going to jump into.
Okay.
I am going to play the title track off your guys' album from 2021. And folks, this is Dark Matter by Carbonstone.
Okay.
We'll be right back after this. right, folks, we're back on Uncovering the Underground, and that was Carbonstone's single off their latest album, Dark Matter. Love that track, love the sound of it. In fact, that was actually the first song I heard from you guys. I randomly came across you guys on Facebook. And you know, as much shit as I talk on Facebook, I will admit this past season of Uncovering the Underground, they have really batted 100 for me. That their suggestions have been phenomenal. So I, had the first 2 or 3, episodes on, and they're like, "Have you heard of so-and-so?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I haven't." And I clicked on it. I'm like, "Oh, that's a dope band," which led me to another one, And I'm like, "Oh, they've upped their game." And that's how I found about Cthulhu Dreamt, who was our guest a few weeks back. You guys, Knights of Malice, who was our guest last week. Just phenomenal guest this season. And folks, it isn't me. It was Facebook. Zuckerberg did something right. So I'm going to give him some credit, even though he's a robot and he's trying to take over the world. He has done very good on giving us good suggestions this season.
So you announced that song as Dark Matter. That song is actually called AM Trauma.
Oh, that's the first song I heard, and it was sent to me as Dark Matter specifically.
Really?
Yeah, that's what it said on the title of it. It said Carbonstone Dark Matter.
Okay, I'm not sure how that happened then. Well, at any rate...
But you guys do have a single called Dark Matter off of Dark Matter, right?
Correct. There is an album or a song called Dark Matter.
So I completely confused myself then, folks. That's my apology. That is the single.
That was one of the songs we wanted you to play, though. No, we were okay.
Well, it was the right song, wrong title. So, folks, that was AM Trauma, and that was one of their two that we talked about was actually one of their big radio songs. So where it's funny to me is I knew that was one of the two big singles. And I knew that wasn't the right. So I don't know what I'm saying, but that is what it says literally on the song track. So who cares? At the end of the day, that is a banging ass song. I love that. It's very catchy.
That song and Hush were going neck and neck for a while in the charts, and it was pretty cool to see. But that song kind of starts a chapter in a bigger picture with the band, because we had released another song and video before that. It was a lyric video, but it was with lots of visual effects, and it was pretty cool. But and that was for the song Phantoms, also on Dark Matter. But this one we did an actual music video, and lots of dark imagery. It's in a club, vampires, etc. It's pretty cool, and we introduced Frankie. And he was just a one-off, just kind of a crazy little idea. He's an undead bear.
I see that in the video. I did see that in one of the videos. Yeah.
And he's a bartender, and he doesn't talk, and he's a dick. And people just latched onto him. We're supposed to be getting Frankie plushies or bobbleheads. Frankie is pretty much as popular, if not more popular, than the band, and he's plotting our demise. So we have to watch our back for him, because he's now been in what we did a live stream where we performed a handful of songs off of Dark Matter the night of the release, and that was pretty fun. It was a technical nightmare, but we pulled it off pretty well. It wasn't really a nightmare. I've had problems with my streaming rig in the past, but for this, things came together and it worked well. So he was featured in that, walking around with a kitten and a black cat, and then we did another video for a song Scream, which is charting now. And he's in that video as well. He's our official mascot. It's a done deal. We can't shake him now.
Isn't it funny how something so simple can become something so big?
Yeah. We didn't even mean it.
And that's usually how it happens is, if you mean it, if you put a lot of attention into it, it won't become what you wanted it to be. But sometimes when you just do the funny side things, like this is just a funny joke, and the next thing you know, like everybody wants that, and then it becomes something way beyond what you ever could have imagined, and you're like, oh shit, I thought this was just a joke.
Things working out the way you didn't plan usually almost always work out better. Like in the video for the song Scream that I mentioned, Corey said, we need some wind because I want papers and trash blowing around. And I said, okay, cool. One of the clubs I work for has these box fans that they literally use to cool the beach. They're like 3 feet wide. They're no joke. So I'll get one of those. And it ended up not just being a source of wind, but also part of the set itself. It's heavily featured throughout the video. And that wasn't originally the plan, but it became part of the plan. And it looks awesome. It really adds a nice industrial effect, which is exactly what we were going for.
Now, what's your feeling on doing music videos? Because as an artist, one of my favorite things, I love playing live. I love live more than the studio, but I love the studio. But then if you ask me what I loved the most, I love doing music videos. I had 9 music videos out, and I just loved being a part of something different because I got to perform the music, though not really, but I got to kind of act and give visual and add storyline and kind of be a director slash actor and really give you something for your brain to absorb beyond just live show or studio. Here's a full production of our artistry. And that was always really stood and rang true for me. So, I mean, what are your thoughts when it comes to music videos? Are you a huge fan of doing that, or are you not? Some people are, some people aren't.
This question actually leads the conversation in a couple different directions. This is a good question. First of all, I love doing music videos. They're so much fun because it gives you an extra space to flex creatively. It's a dimension that you don't normally explore with music, and you get to kind of diversify the means through which you portray your message. It's a lot of fun. Now, the person who we use to produce most of our videos now is, and here's where the conversation goes in another direction, is the former guitarist of Corey's wife's band, Anoxia.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Of which myself and Corey and Dan and Tony are also members. And Jeremy might be involved in there too. Anoxia is still getting his feet off the ground. It's also kind of in a recovery, just like Carbonstone was. And we're getting our work in. But yeah, so again, another creative outlet, which is great for me. Yeah. So that was the other direction the conversation was going to go in. And she does some pretty cool music, and I've done some writing for her as well.
And I just find that, you know, I love being a part of all of it, whether it be photo shoots and promo shoots, whether it be, you know, music videos, whether it be studio, live shows. They all bring their own adventures. Now, what I noticed with music videos, especially in my genre, was it would take me to the weirdest places. You know, 3 o'clock in the morning, shooting a scene of dragging a human body through the woods. And I literally had to have one of the crew jump in a black garbage bag for a couple of the scenes and drag them. And then I would have scenes where there wasn't anybody in the garbage bag. But I mean, it's 3 o'clock. You're in the woods. There's spotlights. There's bugs crawling on us. It's hot. Then we're like, we need a torch, you know, right? So we're like, we don't have a torch. So we took a stick and we wrapped an old shirt around it and we lit it on fire. Well, then the problem is I'm trying to wrap while holding and waving this torch. Well, the shirt's burning. Well, the problem with that is it gives off a very high chemical smell, and I'm breathing this in while wrapping. Yep. And then I'm like choking myself out and like almost throwing up because of this. But you just think of all these funny moments and all these weird things that happen during it, and you're like, you know what? I've always been someone who loves chaos. And what I mean by that is those same moments that someone would be like, oh, breathing it in sucked. Being in the woods in the middle of the night and having bugs crawling on us and all that sucked. No, I love it. I love those moments that I'm like, it was uncomfortable. It was weird. It pushed me. Because as you said earlier, whenever you stepped into the bounds of having to start playing industrial and you weren't used to it, it made you feel a certain way. You went through that esoteric dilemma, you know, and I think that's good. Because if you are not pushing yourself to zones of discomfort, then you're not growing. If you always stay in your circle of comfort, then you never reach beyond that. You have to thrust yourself into those unknown and uncomfortable zones because that is where the growth lies. And I always felt like music videos did that because, anybody can just sit in the studio and never show them your face. Anybody can go to a live show and kind of hide on stage but not be beyond that. But when you're on a music video, you're exposed. They're seeing you. They're seeing your acting. They're seeing a different side of the members of the band. And I loved that.
There's a good fire story that everybody gets to see in the latest Anoxia video where Corey's wife, Crystal, she covered Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks. Okay. And there's a huge fire in that video, and it comes up, it flashes up, and it was a one and done. Like, we only had one shot at it, and luckily we absolutely nailed it. Good. A lot of things, it was like the stars aligned for things to work out right for that video. You should check it out. But shooting video, and we were out in the woods, and bugs and all that stuff. It was actually kind of cold. Yeah, it was cold. So when Carbonstone and lately Anoxia are involved in shooting a music video, for some reason it's always goddamn cold. It was cold for Scream. It was not cold for AM Trauma because we were indoors, but we did a DIY video for a song called Cold Inside, which is a remake of Under My Skin from the album that I helped them produce before the album What You've Become. So 3 albums ago. At any rate, that was literally out in the snow at a state park. We freezed our tails off.
Yeah, those are the worst, but also fun. I shot one called True Psycho, which had a long storyline prior to the actual music starting, and it was like a serial killer / having women locked up in my basement, and the video shows women chained up in the basement and things like that. But during it was like a full-blown snowstorm, and it was like 16 degrees outside with heavy, heavy winds. And I'm supposed to be in a suit out in front of the house, and the winds were ripping through there, and we had to do the scene like 18 times. And we literally could not feel our hands, couldn't feel our face, our feet. I mean, completely numb. And we had to do it over and over and over again. And, like I said, most people would say that sucks and I don't enjoy it, but I'm a weird, sick bastard. I'm like, oh, I loved it. I would do it again. Just because I love being a part of the art. And,
right.
It's just a part of it. So now a couple questions I ask everybody, but there's one other thing I want to bring up, and I'll bring it up afterwards. 2 questions I ask every guest that come on the show, and you certainly do not escape it, would be if you had all of the time back, booking shows, promoting shows, studio time, practicing, live show, everything, all of your time spent in your lifetime in music back right now, poof. And you had to put it into one other thing outside of music, what would it be?
Oh, man. I can tell you what other things are of interest to me. I don't know how I would make that decision, because it really is, apart from my family, it basically is the entirety of my life. But I'm very big in cosmology and astronomy.
Oh, beautiful. Awesome.
And anything science related. Even though I am basically 99% atheist, I consider myself a very, 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 very strong agnostic.
Okay.
I find religious history fascinating.
Me too. That's my
all
bread and butter.
Religions. Not that I would put any energy into that, but that's an interest of mine.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with putting energy into that. That's pretty much so with your music. Anytime I'm not doing anything with the family or my radio shows or anything, all I am doing is studying cosmology, cosmogony, theology, theosophy, philosophy, psychology. It's just, that's all I do. And I'm very interested in ancient religions. I'm very interested in the formation of the world and the formation of the theory of gods. So I'm right there with you. I love that. I think you can't get enough of that. And it constantly changes my perception of reality, what reality is, how reality formed, get into quantum physics and science. I actually go out and speak at different presentations and do seminars at events, at paranormal conventions and things like that, talking specifically on the breakdown of quantum physics and string theory and everything, and how it all ties into how we experience reality. So very much with you on that.
Yeah, the theory of everything.
Theory of everything.
Yeah, there is only principally one law of physics, or one force that everything acts upon, is the idea that they're trying to work out. And I have an interesting take on some of this, particularly with string theory. I understand what they're trying to do. I like where they're trying to go with it, but I don't think that they've got it quite right. It's like you've got this group of people over here that say, hey, there's 5 dimensions, and this group of people over here saying, no, there's these other 6 dimensions, and this one guy comes over and says, no, you're both right, there's 11, ha. And I think what they're starting to do is take an idea and then find a way to prove it mathematically and make it look good on paper, but we really have nothing tangible to show for it. I mean, okay, that's great. You made all these numbers work together. That's beautiful. But that doesn't. It still doesn't make sense.
It makes sense, but it doesn't make sense.
Explain it to me in a tangible way.
It's very hard, and that's what I'm trying to do. And I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people are out there trying to do it. Now, I try to mix. I do that with the field of paranormal and supernatural phenomena, and I'm trying to very much go about it in a way where I mix, obviously, elements of just regular research, but where I bring into it is quantum physics and quantum mechanics, ontological mathematics and Fourier mathematics, and start to bring how there's a code behind it. And yes, there are exterior beings to us, but in the sense that they're interior. And people sometimes look at me and they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, there is currents all around us of frequency and vibration, and there are different ways of interacting and stimulating that vibration. You doing certain things with your mind is pushing off a frequency which interacts with frequencies that are maybe more prevalent in certain areas than others, which cause stimulation and phenomena. And what you're believing is the ghost of your grandmother is really just a hot spot of quantum
type of energy. Yeah.
And your mind is in a certain trance-like or vibrational state that stimulates that and causes a metaphysical reaction that you want to believe is that, so you believe it is that. And I start to get into that, and I mean, it's not, let me tell you right now, Neely, it's not a fan favorite of these conventions. People have me because it's very different, but you have these people that are like on paranormal shows that are like known paranormal investigators that are famous stuff looking at me, and I'm here saying that like what you believe is ghosts is not ghosts. And I'm not saying ghosts don't exist, but what I'm saying is that you yourself as investigators are a huge part of the interaction that you're experiencing. You are causing a chain reaction that then is reacting with you. So it's not the ookie spookies jumping out and scaring you. You are, and they're looking at me like, this motherfucker's ruining my business.
It's like the two-slit experiment, and the act of observation changes the results. Yeah.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
and so it's the equipment that they're using that's creating the input that they're looking for inadvertently.
Yes.
And also, the one thing that I saw on one of these shows that I just said, okay, this is crap. It was on a preview. Lightning struck, and his EKG meter went off. And he said, oh, that proves it. My EKG meter went off when the lightning struck. I'm like, yeah, because there was a shit ton of kinetic energy in the air in that exact moment, you dumb asshole, because lightning just struck.
They don't know what they're they don't know what they're doing. And here's the thing: I've actually taken a lot of groups out to famous locations and helped teach them and take them around. And one of the biggest things I tell people is I want your phone either in the car, I want it off, or I want it on airplane mode, because your text messages will send the EKG meter to go off, and it's text messages. And people have argued with me on that, and I've proven that. The flashlight being turned on. If the flashlight is out in the cold and then you bring it into the warmth from the cold can cause a flashlight to actually turn itself off. I've proved that.
Tower pings. I have a very extensive background in cellular technology. Yeah, I personally
it causes them to go off. Yes,
the circuits that support 4G, which is actually the same bandwidth as 5G.
And people don't see this. And another thing that really is overlooked, so the spirit boxes, they can be good. But the thing is, if you have a group of 4 people sitting in a room and they're asking questions, and you're like, what is your name? Someone's like, it just said Tyler. And then the other 3 are like, it did say Tyler. Meanwhile, it didn't say anything fucking close to Tyler. One person thought they heard that. They said it. The suggestion overtook the mind of the other 3.
Right.
And then that's what it becomes. And you start to fabricate your reality of the experience that you're experiencing. The second thing is, and then we'll jump out of this real quick because we're sidetracked, but that's okay. The second thing is I've seen every ghost show ever pretty much. And I don't watch many of them, but the ones I have watched is like, when you do a spirit box in reverse, it proves that spirits are real. Because if they talk regular forward, when the spirit box is going in reverse, that proves that they're manipulating sound and they're making... I'm like, no, a ghost box goes from station 1 to 100. and it's playing forward. If you put it in reverse mode, it goes from station 100 to 1, but it's still playing the sound forward. It's like going from 105.9 to 105.8 to 105.7. The sound is still coming through forward. It's not playing in reverse like a record player that you're spinning backwards. So whenever you hear someone say hello going backwards compared to going forward, it's the same exact thing, but that's not what they present on these shows. They say when you do the Ghost Box backwards, it's actually playing sound backwards.
It's not.
No, it's not, because how can a live radio station play backwards to you? You would have to record it and then play it in reverse. That is a fucking lie. You just
inadvertently demonstrated to me or taught me what a Ghost Box is, how it works, because I was unfamiliar with that.
It's just radio station bandwidth going forward and backwards.
College for electronics engineering. I understand what you're talking about now, and it just the signal is just a signal once you demodulate it. It's
Well, see, I came out at a seminar right after a guy whose whole presentation was about ghost boxes, and I wasn't planning. I was planning on going over like the errors of paranormal investigating, and they put me on right after the guy that had a huge to do about ghost boxes, and he went deep into reverse, and I'm like, oh shit, this is the worst timing in the world. So I came out after the guy, and I'm ruthless, and I was like, so everything the guy that just talked about before me is wrong. I'm like, and he's absolutely bullshitting you. And he's standing in the back of the room watching my speech, and he's looking at me like, what? And I'm like, yeah, that's wrong. That's not accurate. I don't know if it's because he's just ignorant and not knowing, or he's ignorant and lying to you guys. And here's the reason why. And I completely dispelled that. And I'm like, that's not true. And TV shows say that. Everybody all their little friends that go out and do ghost hunting together, which I hate that fucking term. I'm like, that's all a lie too. And I start to break these myths. And so we won't go much further into that. But as you said, the cosmogony, and just quantum physics and how it all works with ontological mathematics and everything. It's very interesting. And there's a science behind it. And hopefully someday, if I'm able to, I might make some major groundbreaking evidence, towards that. I've been doing it for about 15 years, so I'm still working on that aspect.
Here's where I'm going to reiterate that this is a very different interview than one that Corey would be attending.
He'd be like, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah, he would have driven us away from this a long time ago.
That's all right. Hey, we're having fun with it, and that's what Uncovering the Underground is. We talk about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So my second question, and then we're going to jump into, obviously your guys' track Scream, and I want to talk about that, and we'll drop that.
Cool.
The last question I ask everybody on every show that I do here for UTU, it's kind of a morbid one. It says that, it goes as follows. If you had option A or B to pick from, which would you pick? Option A is it's the end of your life, and you get to spend the last moments of your life with your loved ones, your friends, your family. You can hold them, you can kiss them, you can have them close to you. You are not allowed to write down absolutely anything to them. You are not allowed to communicate or say absolutely anything to them or they to you. It is silence but embrace. Or B, you are separated from a barrier and can see them visibly, can speak back and forth audibly and say everything that you ever wanted to say to one another, but you cannot touch them in those last moments of life. What do you pick?
Gosh, I don't know.
And this goes heavily to what side of the brain you use more, and then that's why I ask that. And there's no wrong answer by any means.
Right. I say this semi-arbitrarily. There is a reason behind it. I don't know if I'm going to share at this moment, but I'm going to go with A.
Okay. That's actually the more popular of the answers for most people.
Okay. The other thing that's interesting about this question is that neither option really addresses how I intend to go out.
Correct.
Because neither of those options will be available. And that is that I plan to drop dead either standing on stage strumming a guitar or pushing a fader from the mixing booth.
Awesome. I love your passion for your work.
Just fall out all at once doing one or the other. I don't plan to ever retire, by the way. Also, I'm going to play music or produce music until I can't. I'm going to live until I die.
And you're in a field that you can, fortunately, continue to do until you physically just can't do it anymore. And I love that. You can be a sound guy until your ears fail you and you can't be a sound guy anymore. You can play live until your hands no longer strum properly. And that's, you're doing it until you physically can't do it anymore. And I love that. Whereas there's a lot of jobs you just can't do anymore. I can't go to the fucking office anymore. I can't deal with people. No, but like with music, you can do it until you either physically can't or you drop dead on stage.
Right.
And I respect that.
Another way to sum it up is I'm going to go out like Lemmy.
There you go. There's nothing wrong with that. You know?
Not the same way, but not for the same reason. I don't drink that much, but yeah.
Yeah, Lemmy was a very rare individual, but you know what? Certainly a legend in his time.
Yeah, I think it's still a valid point of reference for my wishes.
I had a guy a few weeks back, and then we'll jump into the last question here. He completely sidetracked. Everybody gives me option A or B. This guy says, "Well, to be honest with you, man, I'm gonna be truthfully transparent. I'm not picking A or B. I'm saying fuck everybody. Me and my dog are going on a hike in the mountains." And I was like, oh, all right, man.
I mean, that's kind of cool. And that actually reminds me of Crazy Stuff and the Crazy Band and saying fuck you to the crowd and everything. There was a band that I mixed, and I forget what they were called. It was a local band. And they ended the set, with all the crash cymbals and holding out the guitar chords. And he said, fuck the Democrats, fuck the Republicans, fuck God, fuck you, and fuck me.
And that's it. We're done.
And I kind of liked that. That just kind of struck a chord with me. I dug it. You
know what? I used to tell friends, especially with my rap music. Somehow, when I first came out, I didn't think anybody would take me seriously, and then I was actually very wrong. It became very serious very quick, and people loved it. And my persona, as I said, was very dark and pretty much as brutal and as intense as you could be. And I used to joke with my friends. I'm like, dude, these fans, they love it, bro. I'm like, they love anything that I'll say to them, no matter how extreme it is, they love it. I was like, you want to see what I'm talking about? He's like, fuck yeah, man, show me. So I went out to this packed house and I started playing in this little club. And I was like, what the fuck's up, everybody? How you doing? I was like, I'm fucking every one of your ear pussies tonight. Every one of you are getting it. Everyone starts cheering. I look over, he starts laughing. I says, you want to know hear one of my biggest fantasies? And this is fucked up, folks, so I apologize for bringing this out tonight, but I just feel like doing it. And everybody's like, yeah, tell us. I says, really, guys, my biggest fantasy is I just want to cover you guys all in gasoline while I just jerk off and light you all on fire and watch you burn for me. And it went silent for a second, and I looked over at my buddy. And he's like, what the fuck? And then the crowd just exploded and started cheering. And I smiled at him and shook my head like, yeah, see, dude, they love it. It doesn't matter what you say. And after the show, he's like, man, I've never seen anybody say anything like that live. And actually people dig it. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with these people, man, but they love me. And it was just a funny moment that, with that style of horrorcore underground hip hop, it didn't matter what I said. People were like, fuck yeah, man, that's dope. And I'm like, I'm in my niche right now. So it was a good time.
So I have to ask you now, do you like Ghostman?
No, man, I really don't listen to it. And the weird thing is, I don't really listen to a lot of other horrorcore or that style of rap. The rap I always listened to was like Method Man and Wu-Tang Clan. I listened to...
Well, you gotta love Wu-Tang.
Yeah, Wu-Tang was killer. And I mean, I listened to a lot of different people like Black Thought and, just hip-hop and real hardcore, really good, underground rap. So it was always threw people off when I did underground horrorcore, and people would be like, oh, you're listening to like a lot of like ICP and Twisted and shit. I'm like, nah, I really ain't, man. I'm like, I listen to rap. I just am really aggressive, so when I come out, my shit's really fucking mean. I'm like, but no, I don't really listen to a lot of that. That's not my thing. I don't like it. And it always threw people off, like, you don't like that style of music? I'm like, absolutely not. I fucking hate it. I'm like, but I love making it.
Well, I mean, are you familiar with Ghostman, though?
I am, yeah.
Okay, all right. I just had to make sure.
I've never really listened to a whole lot of his music. I've listened to a few tracks. I mean, it's definitely different.
He's gone a bit less metal and transient and electronic and a little more straight with the Suicide Boys rap style.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I give him credit because he has like one of my buddies, he goes by Synth. He is a vocalist for a death metal band called Nine Stitch Method, and we had him on earlier in this season. And he has his own side project, Synth, where it's like, metal / trap, rap, kind of mixed together, kind of like the Suicide Boys / Ghostmain type feel. And that's become a big thing in the last several years. People love that. It's like a Marilyn Manson mixed with like hip hop beats and
right. And death metal. And whatever the hell else you want. They are I would say the least afraid to flex the multi-genre muscle and combine different things with this already unique style that they have.
Yes, and you know what? He mixes a lot of occult elements in it, which is cool. I mean, talking about Crawley, and he talks about, John D. and Angelic, Enochian magic on one of his videos I've seen him talking about. So, I mean, he has some occult basis. Now, I don't know if that's just a quick Google search and he pulls up some cool shit and puts it in a video because people like that, or he's actually a practitioner. But as a practitioner myself, I get all the references of the little bit that I have listened to. I'm like, oh, he's definitely throwing some occult, references out there.
Right.
So, definitely, appreciate it for what it is. I mean, it's not really my bag, but I appreciate it.
Right.
Now, we're going to jump into the last part here, and we'll go ahead and finish out. We went a little bit past what we normally do, but that's okay with me. I always enjoy talking. We're going to talk about, obviously, your guys' single, Scream. So you released a new track, and I think that it's very catchy. It's hauntingly catchy, and what I mean by that is every time I hear it, it sticks in my mind for hours, and I can't get it out of my head. And that's a good thing. You know what I mean? You hear the track, you like it, you're singing along with it, but 2 hours later, you catch yourself humming it under your breath, and you're like, oh shit, I was just humming that again. Like, it sticks with you. The video's dope, the song's dope. I think you guys did a very good, very good display on this song. And I think it's going to continue to climb and do very well for you, just like the other two tracks that we played this evening. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Scream, and then we'll go ahead, before we jump into it, tell us anything else that we need to know about you guys coming up, anything we need to check out, and then we'll go ahead and jump into that and finish out for the evening.
Okay. So Scream is kind of like a sequel to Dark Matter. Dark Matter is not necessarily a concept album as such, but it does kind of tell a story. And it starts with laceration, AM trauma, and then we eventually get to heal, and there's a lot of processes in between. And it's all kind of laid out in the song titles mostly. But yeah, so Scream is kind of like the follow-up, and we decided to change up our delivery system a little bit in terms of how we're going to start releasing music, and this is the start of it. If we do another full-length album, it won't be for a while. We do have another small project in the works. I'm not going to talk too much about it. It's a DIY project. We're going to get Tony involved on some levels if we can, but it's going to be mostly me and Corey doing this. And the video was just awesome and a lot of fun. It wasn't a blank slate per se. We had ideas, but TJ, the videographer, he did a really good job, and he always does with us. And Corey's wife, Crystal, helps out a lot with setting up the scenes, and she cameos in a lot of the videos. And, the team that we put together, they're just kind of a master of illusion. It'd be hard to believe watching the AM Trauma video that was Corey's very, very small living room.
Okay, wow. All right. Yeah, no, I seen the video, so that is impressive.
Yeah. That Scream was shot in my shop. That's just a 3-bay garage with no electricity. I had to run a generator to get those lights.
Okay.
Creativity, being resourceful, and having fun. We had a loose storyline, or Not, I mean, I guess there's a story in there, but we just kind of let TJ handle the reins, just like we do with Tony. If a decision needs to be made, we don't question it. They're not suggestions. This is what's happening. And I'm very happy with how it turned out. It's probably easily our best video so far. I don't know how we're going to top it, but we're going to have to.
Yeah, it's just it gives you that motivation to do bigger and better things even on the next one, and I love that.
Yeah. We have a contest going right now. I don't remember exactly what the rules are. There's actually 2 contests going right now, and I'll explain the second one in a minute when it becomes relevant. But we're trying to drive up our Spotify listens on Scream. The video has only been out for about 6 or 7 weeks now. The song and the video dropped simultaneously. And I think we're about to break 60,000 views on YouTube, or maybe it's 60,000 streams on Spotify. I don't remember. But we're trying to drive all those numbers up. You want to look for a group on Facebook called the Traumatics, Carbonstone Traumatics. That's where we tend to do more of our interactions, and there's exclusive things going on for group members. We do it to beat the algorithm on Facebook, to be completely honest with you. And then we're also playing Rock on the Hill in Hanover, Pennsylvania with Flaw, Jimmy's Chicken Shack, and Tantric, and that is on the 21st of next month. It's a Saturday, and we're giving away 2 tickets to that, and you can see in the group on a post from Corey as of a few hours ago how you can win that. We just opened that one up. And we have a couple other shows in the works. We're not trying to stack the show schedule up too much. We're putting a little more energy into Anoxia, and also working on a live video from the last show we played. We're going to keep people satisfied. We're going to give them little bits, just enough to keep them from starving. That's where we are right now.
Well, folks, if you're listening out there, I ask right now that as soon as this show ends, you go to Carbonstone's Facebook page, you give them a like, a follow. If you haven't checked out the rest of their catalog, give them a listen, purchase the album, go to a show near you as they play. As I say each and every episode, you are the lifeblood to local talents, to underground bands. Without you, we couldn't do and wouldn't do what we're doing. So thank you so much for your support out there. Click the like, share, and follow button on the show. Make sure you check out our past episodes. Make sure you go and support everything that these guys are doing. Neely, I had a wonderful time talking with you this evening. Great interview, great time just hanging out and getting to know you better and the band better, so thank you.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, and I look forward to having you guys back again down the road. And folks, if you are listening out there and you're wondering who is coming up on the upcoming weeks, next week we have model Miss Red. She was a member of Brutal Business Entertainment, which was my company for quite some time, and as we dissolved, different bands and models and different things with the label and became more just of a radio label, a lot of the artists went off to do bigger things, and Miss Red certainly was one of them. She has been crushing the scene, going all over the country doing modeling and just doing some big shoots with some huge world famous names. So we look forward to catching up with Miss Red and seeing exactly what she's been up to. That is on May 5th. May 12th we have thrash metal band Aerocabra. Very excited to talk to these guys and find out who and what they are. We have May 19th, The Fall of Me, a 3-piece, very unique band that we'll be catching up with as well here on the Devil Inside Records or DI Records. We have May 26th, comedian Lauren Petrie, and this will be the first time we've had a comedian on the show, which I'm excited for. She is filthy, I will tell you. Her comedy is vulgar, it is raw, it is in your face, you'll love it.
The best kind.
The best kind. She holds nothing back, and that's why she's coming on. June 9th, we have Renaissance Rock Orchestra coming on. These guys do some pretty wild stuff. I was very excited to come across them as well. And then June 23rd, the season finale, and I announced it, I think, last week. Instead of having a guest on, there was actually a couple very large names that were willing to do the season finale, and I turned them down. And the reason why is I want to do something different with this one. Instead of having a guest on the last season, our last episode of the season, I want to hear from you guys out there, the fans. So we're going to open up the lines. You can call in and ask me questions, talk about guests in the past, talk about situations of what's going on in music, whatever the hell you want. For 2 hours, we're going to go ahead and deep dive into content of the listeners' choices. So I'll be arranging some posts of seeing what kind of questions you want me to cover, giving a line that you guys can call into, and it is open airwaves, folks, so you can call in on the season finale. We'll all kick it together, have a good time, and close out season 2 of Uncovering the Underground. And then the following week, we kick into with both of our shows, Knights of the Nephilim and Celestial Oddities, and start those 2 seasons. So other than that, we're going to go ahead and play our final song this evening. Make sure you check out Carbonstone, support them. And Neely, once again, thank you so much for coming on and for everything you guys do. And I look forward to watching as a fan and seeing what you guys have in the future.
Cool, thank you.
Not a problem. Well, folks, this is their latest single, and this is called Scream by Carbonstone, only on Uncovering the Underground. Catch you next week.
Becomes denial. I know you're telling lies. Can't hide behind that smile. Fuck you and your disguise. It's been a while since you've been put in place, so I'm here to remind you, you don't mean anything. Till I barely breathe.